All right, guys, welcome back to Revive School. Here we are. We're continuing our study in the Minor Prophets. And Kevin, we're technically in book number 11 of 12. We're in the book of Zechariah. Man, this is just crazy because there's so much of a message of the Messiah in all of these chapters. That's kind of where I would like to spend a lot more time in here because remember all of this, and Mindy's painting, you guys. I mean, it's incredible. But it talks about and references the pierced one. And that's our phrase, that's our word that we have for Christ. It goes, and we're actually going to get to it today. And when we look at Zechariah 9, 10, 11, and 12, we got four chapters today. We're going to land the plane, eventually in Zechariah 12, but let me kind of just begin the summary of how Zechariah, remember this, Zechariah is a prophet. We've already addressed this, but you got any other fun facts about Zechariah, Kevin, that you would remember?
His buddy is Haggai.
His buddy is Haggai. That's right. Haggai. They're contemporaries. They run together. Why? What are they doing? They're here saying, guys, I want you to be rebuilding the temple. Right? They've been playing around in the sense of hey, we got 50,000 exiles. They're now set free. They're working on the foundation, but they become discouraged because of the neighbors. They don't even think it's not looking the same. And then Haggai and Zechariah come in and say, guys, we can do this. And so what does he do? He begins to paint a picture. Josh did a great job yesterday and the day before. We talked about a total of 8 visions. 8 visions that talk about we believe in the potential. Really, that's what it comes down to. We believe in the potential of Israel. And so it sounds like, Kevin, restoration is coming. That's the language that you're hearing that Zechariah is communicating. And so what I want to do is I want to summarize Zechariah 9 if we can, Kevin. Let's just begin to unpack that. Zechariah 9 verse 1, really 1 through 8, talks about this judgment, okay, that's coming upon in verse 1. It says this, the word of the Lord, it's an oracle, which means burden or judgment, is against the land of Hadrach, and Damascus is its resting place for the eyes of men, and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord. So judgment is going to come to Hadrach and Damascus in verse 1. In verses 2, 3, and 4, you're going to see judgment coming against Hamath, Tyre, and Sidon. Again, all of this is coming against, Kevin, these are people that are not from the southern kingdom. I know that sounds strange, but in some of the prophets, we hear judgment coming against the Israelites. This is not the case. It's coming against the other people. And then in verses 5, 6, 7, and 8, you have judgment that's coming against the Philistines. Here we're referencing Ashkelon, will see it and be afraid. Gaza too will writhe in great pain, and as will Ekron, for her hope will fail. So these are Philistine cities, okay, that are along the Mediterranean coast. And he says judgment is coming against these people groups. Now he continues on in verse 9. In verse 9 it says this, in Zechariah 9:9, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout in triumph, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I mean, okay, remember how we talked about the Messiah? It feels like in every chapter. This would be one of those verses, like blinking lights. This is a big one. Zechariah 9:9 is also, Kevin, this is connected directly with and I like what J. Vernon McGee says, it's the triumphal entry of Christ when he came into Jerusalem, Matthew 21, verse 5. Matthew 21, verse 5 is alluding to what we just read in Zechariah 9:9. Tell daughter Zion, see your king is coming to you, gentle and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. Guys, this is Palm Sunday. This is what we're talking about. Palm Sunday is coming in on Matthew 21, 5, and it's in reference to Zechariah 9. One more, Kevin. If you go to John 12, verse 15, John 12, verse 15, it says this. It says, fear no more, daughter Zion. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. Now, here's what's interesting about this. In Matthew 21 and in John 12, if you'll go back to, Kevin, Zechariah 9:9, there's something missing. In Zechariah 9:9, there's something missing that Matthew doesn't quote, nor does Zechariah. What do they not quote? They don't quote in, Kevin, the part that's omitted by Matthew is rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, shout in triumph. So that part is, you're missing part of this, this prophetic word, and that part right there is going to be fulfilled in His second coming. There's a lot of this already, but not yet. Zechariah 9:9 says, hey, look, yes, Christ is, the pierced one, is coming in on a donkey, on the colt, the foal of a donkey, and yet not all of it has come to fruition. I think it's an incredible picture that Zechariah says, but we need to get ready because in verse 10, look at this text says, I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem. The bow of war will be removed and he will proclaim peace to the nations. Who? The king coming on the donkey. He's going to proclaim peace to the nations. His dominion will extend from sea to sea, from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. Peace is going to come on, Kevin, here it is, the second advent. Not the first coming, but the second. Because we haven't seen this. We haven't seen peace to all of the nations. But we will after the tribulation, when the day of the Lord takes place and Christ comes back.
It's so easy to see how, like, the people of Christ's time, of Jesus when He was here the first time, they were looking for all of this prophecy, and it gets separated out. I mean, there's pieces of it.
Yep. It's easy for us to look on it. For them, not so much. How would you know that one sentence is different than the second and the third sentence? Wait, what? In verse 11 through 17, what Zechariah really emphasizes is that the Lord is going to, when He comes back to establish peace, He is going to deliver His people. Look what He says, I will release your prisoners from the waterless cistern. This is the language that you're going to see. Return to a stronghold, you prisoners who have hope. Today I declare that I will restore double to you. Everything is about restoration and release. Verse 13, he continues to paint this picture. For I will bend Judah as my bow. I'll fill that bow with Ephraim. I'll rouse your son Zion against your son's Greece. I'll make you like a warrior's sword. Everything is pro-Israel. Verse 14, then the Lord will appear over them, and His arrow will fly like lightning. The Lord God will sound the trumpet, there's that language, and advance with the southern storms. Verse 15, the Lord of hosts will defend them. They will consume and conquer with sling stones. They will drink and be rowdy as if with wine. They will be as full as a sprinkling basin, like those at the corners of the altar. The Lord their God will save them. There's that language. On that day as the flock of His people. And I love this image, for His people are like jewels in a crown. Kevin, this makes me think of that treasures language, that God, you are a special treasure, you are a possession, sparkling over His land. In verse 17, how lovely and beautiful they will be. Some of His people. Grain will make the young men flourish, and new wine the young women. So what you have in Zechariah 9, you guys, is an incredible picture of judgment against everybody else, and a deliverance and a redemption that can only be found, yes, through the king that's coming in on a donkey, right? People are rejoicing. The Hosanna is being shouted. And yes, what is coming to fruition? People are going to be set free on the second advent. Not the first coming, but the second. So again, there's this picture over and over again. You got to remember something. Zechariah, you guys, okay, they're already out of captivity. Now there's that first wave that's coming, the 50,000, they're coming, and they're starting to rebuild. But he says, man, there's something more than just this tangible place. So when you jump into Zechariah 10, what you're going to hear is that all of the folks from Judah and Israel have been scattered. And so what you're going to see in Zechariah 12 says, but now they're going to be coming back. It's a cool picture when you think about it in Zechariah 9. God's going to establish the king. It's going to be the Prince of Peace. Even it says that in Isaiah 9. And yet, as the peace is being established, all of His people are coming back. Kevin, it's this remnant mentality. It's this remnant of regathering. What do you want to say, Kevin?
And yet, 2,000 years down the road,
They're still waiting.
Coming slowly.
They're coming slowly. Verse 1, it says this, ask the Lord for rain in the season of spring rain. Most folks, when they study this, they actually tangibly think it's physical rain here. It's not spiritual. Like, Lord, ask the Lord for rain in the season of spring rain. The Lord makes the rain clouds, and He will give them showers of rain and crops in the field for everyone. I love what Josh said yesterday about, when the prophetic word is coming out, make it practical. I love that image. I mean, I think sometimes they're all the way up here, but you can still make them practical. Ask the Lord for rain. Why? Because they need it. Let him give them showers of rain and crops in the field. Because Kevin, up until that point, things are not good. Give them crops in the field for everyone. The rainfall is to be restored to the land. Verses 2 and 3, Scripture says this, "For the idols speak falsehood, and the diviners see illusions. They relate empty dreams and offer empty comfort. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They suffer affliction because there's no shepherd." So Kevin, over the course of time, the 10 tribes have been lost, Judah has been scattered, and now he's just saying, guys, don't follow into these ways. Because then in verse 3, look what it says. In verse 3, it says, "My anger burns against the shepherds, so I will punish the leaders. For the Lord of hosts has tended his flock, the house of Judah. He will make them like his majestic steed in battle." And I love verse 4. Verse 4 says, "From them will come the cornerstone. From them, the tent peg. From them, the battle bow. From them, every ruler." And if you just sit on this verse, you guys, how much more messianic can you be? From those that have scattered, from those that all the nations have plucked them everywhere, now he's gathering them back, and from them is going to be the cornerstone. Kevin, we could have picked so many words. The tent peg, the battle bow. From them, every ruler, Christ is truly, and I think this is a reference to both first and second coming. It's an incredible picture. And in Zechariah, if you just read through it, or you can't even find it in your Minor Prophets, we never spend time about the prophetic word saying, Christ is the answer. In verse 5, it continues on, "Together they'll be like warriors in battle, trampling down the mud of the streets. They'll fight because the Lord is with them, and they will put horsemen to shame." In verse 6, it says, "I will strengthen the house of Judah and deliver the house of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them, and they will be as though I had never rejected them. For I am Yahweh their God," and it continues on, "and I will answer them. By God's grace and mercy, he gathers his people." And the cornerstone is Christ himself. Verses 9 through 12, it's kind of an interesting one. In verse 9, it says, "Though I sow among the nations, they'll remember me in the distant lands. They and their children will live and return." So he's just, again, prophetically saying the people have been scattered, right? That's what he's saying. But they're going to, Kevin, what? Return. Zechariah 10, you guys, is all about his people returning back to the land. He's going to regather them all. Now, when we transition into Zechariah 11, this is kind of a really powerful picture, and you really begin to see Christ actually become rejected by his people in Zechariah 11. So when I say we got to spend a little bit of time in each one of these chapters, it's because every chapter, Kevin, has a reference to the Messiah somehow. In Zechariah 11, look at this. In verses 1 through 6, you begin to see language of false shepherds. "Open your gates, Lebanon, and fire will consume your cedars. Wail, cypress, for the cedar has fallen, the glorious trees are destroyed. Wail, oaks of Bashan, for the stately forest has fallen. Listen to the wail of the shepherds, for their glory is destroyed. Listen to the roar of young lions." I just got done watching Lion King. Roar! Rich, when you watch that, don't you want to try that?
No.
I knew you were going to say that. I shouldn't have asked you that question. I tried doing it on an airplane.
Well,
Simba has the little voice, and then he becomes the son of Mufasa. Whatever. "Listen to the roar of young lions, for the thickets of the Jordan are destroyed." Verse 4, "Yahweh my God says this, shepherd the flock intended for slaughter." Verse 5, it says this, "Those who buy them slaughter them, but are not punished. Those who sell them say, praise the Lord, because I've become rich. Even their own shepherds have no compassion for them." And in verse 6, "Indeed, I will no longer have compassion on the inhabitants of the land. This is the Lord's declaration. Instead, I will turn everyone over to his neighbor and his king. They will devastate the land, and I will not deliver it from them." You know, there's a question here a little bit about, like, who is he talking about in this context? The reality is false shepherds do deceive people. That's what we see here. Some would say, J. Vernon McGee would think possibly this is a reference to Rome as a conqueror. Do we know that for sure? No. But either way, somebody came in and attempted to conquer. Now, when you get into verses 7 through 14, whew, here we go. "So I shepherded the flock intended for slaughter." Now, we're going to talk about two staffs. The the afflicted of the flock, I took 2 staffs, calling one favor and the other union, and I shepherded the flock. So I shepherded the flock with 2 staffs, favor and union. It's a really cool picture. Now, some would even say this word favor could imply beauty or grace. Okay? And then this word union could imply bond, like a bond of some form. And so let's just kind of begin to unpack this a little bit. If you go, Kevin, to verse 8. In 1 month, I got rid of 3 shepherds. I became impatient with them, and they also detested me. Verse 9. Then I said, I'll no longer shepherd you. Let what is dying die, and let what is going astray go astray. Let the rest devour each other's flesh. Wow, this is just really uplifting. Verse 10. Next, I took my staff called favor, and I cut it in 2, annulling the covenant I had made with all of the peoples. Continues on in verse 11. It was annulled on that day, and so the afflicted of the flock who were watching me knew that it was the word of the Lord. He cut his staff, man. So much for a walking stick. Verse 12, then I said to them, if it seems right to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. Well, if you should pay me, go ahead. If not, go ahead and keep them. So they weighed my wages, 30 pieces of silver. This is where it gets interesting, you guys. Watch. Throw it to the potter, the Lord said to me. This magnificent price I was valued by them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and I threw it to the house of the Lord, to the potter. Look, verses 12 and 13, you guys. This is clearly about a reference of Christ being betrayed by Judas. If you go back to verse 12, Kevin, I mean, here you have this language. If it seems right to you, go ahead, give me 30 wages. If not, keep them. So they weighed my wages, 30 pieces of silver. What did Judas get paid, Kevin? If you go to Matthew 26, verse 15. Matthew 26, verse 15 paints a picture. And they said, what are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you? Judas says this to his people. What are you willing to pay me? So they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. You see the same thing in Matthew 27, 3 through 10, and then in Acts 1, 17 through 20. So you see this rejection of the king in Zechariah. Kevin, I don't know if the prophetic guys, when they get these words, do you think they know? Oh yeah, this is talking about the Messiah being turned down.
I mean, again, like you got to separate it from the current, separate it from Christ's first coming, from his second coming.
Yep. So Christ has already come back, right? First time. Christ has already come back, and now in this language, which I think is really interesting, because remember in Zechariah 9, they talked about the king coming. Right? The king was coming. Now in this, in Zechariah 10, you have a reference to Christ the cornerstone. But then in Zechariah 11, you have the rejection. Do you see the progression here of 9, 10, and 11? You see the rejection in Zechariah 11 of the king. So Zechariah 9, 10, and 11, so you kind of have to wonder, what else is he trying to say to us? Well, when you go to Zechariah 11, verse 15, 16, and 17, it gets really interesting. The Lord also said to me, take the equipment of a foolish shepherd. Verse 16, I'm about to raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for those who are going astray, and he will not seek the lost or heal the broken. He will not sustain the healthy, but will devour the flesh of the fat sheep and tear off their hooves. Verse 17, woe to the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May a sword strike his arm and his right eye. May his arm wither away and his right eye go completely blind. You guys, 15, 16, and 17, if you slow down and you say, who's this false shepherd? It possibly could talk about the Antichrist. So 9, 10, and 11 talk about the king. The king as the cornerstone is coming. The king is going to be rejected. And oh, by the way, in 11, the Antichrist is going to enter the picture as a false shepherd. What? This is in Zechariah. And I'm just thinking, you got to be kidding me. Why aren't we preaching this? Why aren't we talking about this? I know, because I'm not spending a whole lot of time here. And when I start looking at this, I'm utterly blown away. So let's go to Zechariah 12, because to me, this is the climax. Zechariah 12 is like the home run, and it builds and it leads even into 13 and 14. And Zechariah 12:1 says, an oracle, the burden, the word of the Lord concerning Israel, a declaration of the Lord who stretched out the heavens, laid the foundation of the earth, and formed the spirit of man within him. I love that language, by the way, of stretched, laid, and formed. It's a picture of the Lord's power. And he says in verse 2, look, Jerusalem, okay, here's what's going to happen. You should expect Jerusalem's going to be attacked. Warren Wiersbe clearly just spells out, look, Jerusalem's going to be attacked. Look, I'll make Jerusalem a cup that causes staggering for the peoples who surround the city. Normally, when you have this language of cup, okay, normally you have this language of like, when you drink it, you're going to get drunk, right? Or the cup of wrath that's coming against you. What this says is that Jerusalem's going to be a cup, and then when they try to mess with Jerusalem, they're going to start staggering, and oh, by the way, it's not going to be good for people that are drinking the cup of Jerusalem. Does that make sense? Those people will actually, nations will plan to swallow up Jerusalem, but as they're swallowing up Jerusalem, that will lead to their stagger and their demise. The siege against Jerusalem will also involve Judah. I love this. It says in verse 3, on that day, look at this. So you have a cup that originally it looks for Judah, Jerusalem. It's not going to happen. Verse 3 says, on that day, I'll make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who will try to lift up the stone of Jerusalem, it will be injured. So the people who try to lift up Jerusalem, they're going to actually get hurt themselves severely when all the nations of the earth gather against her. In other words, God is clearly protecting Jerusalem. Kevin, it sure sounds like at the end, right? You've got the shepherd and the king who's entering in, the cornerstone, and then he gets rejected. The Antichrist shows up, and now everybody is trying to come against Jerusalem in Zechariah 12, right? And clearly anybody who attacks them with the cup or the stone, they're going to actually get hurt. And then he continues to build this in verse 4. On that day, you guys, this is the language. On the day of the Lord, this is the Lord's declaration. I'll strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness. I'll keep a watchful eye on the house of Judah, but strike all the horses of the nations with blindness. When this battle takes place, I'm going to create confusion. I'm going to create madness. I'm going to create blindness. Everything that's come against Israel has now fallen on them. And here's what's kind of crazy. Wiersbe says it's so simple. Get ready, the defeat is now coming. And in verse 5 it says, then each of the leaders of Judah will think to himself, The residents of Jerusalem are my strength through the Lord of hosts, their God. And on that day I will make the leaders of Judah like a fire pot in a wood pile. So you can see two illustrations, okay, two visuals that come upon, and Zechariah says, look, okay, the leaders are going to be a fire pan, okay, and they're going to be like a flaming torch. This is just a simple implication that, let me build on the next one here real quick. It says this, besides a flaming torch among sheaves, they will consume, let me back this up. On that day, I will make the leaders of Judah like a fire pot. Okay, that's the first illustration. Like a flaming torch among the sheaves. They will consume all the peoples around them on the right and on the left, while Jerusalem continues to be inhabited on its site in Jerusalem. In other words, you have this power of God being displayed through his people, and whenever somebody tries to attempt to get them, they become stubble. They become this dry stubble that literally just what? Gets burned up. And then he says in verse 7, the Lord is going to save the tents of Judah first. These tents are like the people that are living outside of Jerusalem. He's going to save those people as well so that the glory of David's house and the glory of Jerusalem's residents may not be greater than that of Judah. It's interesting, Judah is the first one he's going to save. He says in verse 8, on that day, the Lord will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that on that day, the one who is weakest among them will be like David on that day, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of the Lord before them. In other words, David, you guys, do you remember? It says, Scripture talks about this in 1 Samuel. He killed tens of thousands of people. They're going to be like David. Even the weakest one is going to be like David. And then this image of the angel of the Lord. Remember the angel of the Lord killed the Assyrians? Remember this 185,000 just gone? So whether they're the weakest or like the house of David, all of their enemies are going to be destroyed. Kevin, this sure sounds like a real incredible build for not only now that we're in a battle, but man, there's something else that's coming. And he says in verse 9, on that day I will set out to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And verse 9 is a summary of everything we just read. I'm going to destroy all of the nations that come against Jerusalem. And then here we go, you guys. Verse 10. We clearly have seen, how do I put this? Like all of the tribulation. Like we're seeing the battle that's at the Armageddon, the valley of Jezreel, like there's a battle that's taking place. And God says, I'm going to destroy all the nations. At this point, you guys, somewhere in this time frame, it says in Zechariah 12:10, one of the most powerful scripture verses that we've been waiting for in all of the Old Testament. Then I'll pour out a spirit of grace and prayer on the house of David. God does this, by the way. And the residents of Jerusalem. And they will look at me whom they pierced. They'll mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly for him as one weeps for a firstborn. Kevin, up until this point, the Jewish people have said no. They've said no to Isaiah's words. They've said no to Jeremiah's words. They've said no to all of the prophetic words. And Zechariah says, after the battle takes place and all of the nations are destroyed, that yes, the Jewish people, God's chosen people, are going to actually look upon Christ. They're going to look at his hands, on both hands. They're going to look at his feet, and they're going to realize they were the ones. Yes, it's our sin nature, absolutely. But they're the ones that are going to realize, yes, they put him on the cross with the Romans' help. They're the ones who said, crucify him. And they're the ones that are going to say, man, we are the ones that have pierced the Messiah. And then they begin to mourn. They begin to weep bitterly for the Messiah, that they realize they're the ones that killed the Messiah. And what happens is, you guys, there becomes to be a shift, a radical shift. And this morning, you guys, it plays out in verse 11. But before we do, you got to understand something, you guys. Like, when this happens, you will see a true revival like we've never seen in our lifetime. Like, yeah, we've had a first great awakening. Yeah, we've had a second great awakening. You guys, this right here is the massive great awakening that ushers in all of what Christ has been talking about. The Jewish people realize they pierced the Messiah. Kevin?
Unfortunately, it says they're going to see him. And so it's after he comes back, they're going to realize.
Kevin, let's go to Revelation 1:7. It kind of puts a bookend to this whole thing of Zechariah and Revelation. Revelation 1:7 says, look, he's coming with the clouds. This is the Messiah. And every eye will see him. Look at this. Every eye will see him, including those who pierced him. And all the families, look at this, all of the families of the earth will mourn over him. Kevin, this sure sounds like language of what we're talking about. When they see him, those that they pierced, all the families are going to mourn over him. This is certain. Amen. And so Revelation 1:7 is a confirmation of what you're going to see in Zechariah 12, but really Paul writes about this in Romans 11, 25, 26, and 27. He talks about the mass movement of the Jewish people turning to the Messiah. He says in 25, so that you will not be conceited, brothers. I don't want you to be unaware of this mystery. A partial hardening has come to Israel. In other words, there's a partial hardening of their heart not being exposed to the Messiah, right? Until all of the Gentiles, the full number of Gentiles has come in verse 26. And in this way, all of Israel will be saved. So do you catch this? Because of the gospel going to all of the Gentiles, there's a partial hardening to them. Eventually, Scripture says, when all the Gentiles have heard, all of Israel will be saved. As it is written, the liberator will come from Zion. He will turn away godlessness from Jacob. And then in 27, and this will be my covenant with them when I take away their sins. So when you get to the point of the tribulation, you get to the point, yes, of the day of the Lord, somewhere in there, the fullness of the Gentiles will have happened. At that point, it's like God's going to open their eyes, soften their hearts, and they're going to see that they are the ones who have pierced the Messiah. When all the eyes are going to be on the Messiah, they're going to mourn, they're going to weep bitterly, and yes, they're going to turn to Christ as their Messiah. Zechariah 12 points to what I believe is one of the greatest moves of God that's coming still. It's the Jewish people crying out to Yeshua. All right, guys, we'll continue this study and wrap it up tomorrow with Zechariah 13 and 14. Have a great day. Thanks.